So for this video, we'll be working on multiplication on the Friden STW10, and that'll be mostly this section over here on the left. And you can see that there's, in addition to our number pad entry here, we've got these 3 switches and 4 buttons. That'll allow us to do some different order of operations stuff. And we can just cover these two real quick here. This is the actual primary multiplication button here, as well as this up here. If we just have something in the register, we can see that's the clear for the multiplier register, and it doesn't affect the main carriage. So we'll work off of, probably going to skip this one, this little just basic entry, and we'll do this one down here with the decimal places. So you can see our examples here are yards of material at different rates per yard. So gravel or dirt or fertilizer or something, whatever they don't specify. And you can see here that it gives our quantities with a fraction. So 22 1/8 yards, 65 1/4 yards. But they've conveniently converted that down to decimal places for us. And you can see over here, a couple pages back, they actually give you a nice little decimal equivalence of common fractions table to reference as well. So yeah, let's set up the machine. We're using the add lever in the down position, which clears the main keyboard entry between operations. Over here, we're setting, this one's a little bit fussy to move, but we're giving 2 decimal places into our multiplier. Where's that? There. And then over here on the main keyboard, we're going to be using 5 decimal places. And you can see in the example, it gives us a couple trailing zeros. But the little explainer here at the bottom just goes into, that gives us a nice visual divide between the gray and brown keys here on the bottom to help us visually keep track of where we're at on the main keyboard. In the upper dials, because we have 2 decimal places plus 5 decimal places, our decimal in the upper dials will be between 7 and 8 to give us our 7 decimal places. And then the lower dials, which just as we've gone through before, keep track of the number of cycles up or down. So however many numbers of additions or subtractions. And because multiplication is just rapid additions, it'll have 2, just like our multiplier section. And I believe we're ready to get started with our first entry. So 1.45 in our multiplier times 22.125 to 22 1/8 in our main keyboard. So 145 to 2125, and then there we go. So our expected result in our upper dials, 32.08125, and our lower dials is 1.45, and we have that here. So 32.08125 and 145, right? And you can actually do that same thing over here. So we're actually multiplying 145 by, what was that? 2,212,500. So 2,212,500 times 145, right? Gives us a big number there. And then if we multiply that by 0.1234567 decimals, so we just moved the decimal place 7 points over, right? We get our 32.08125. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're actually just multiplying those much larger numbers, and then we're manually keeping track of our decimal places on top of it. So let me just find my page again. Right, so now that we have that one done, we can move on to our next example here. So 2.65 in the multiplier times 65.25 on the main keyboard. And we'll have an expected result of 172.9125 on the upper dials, and our lower dials will match our multiplier. So 265, and you can see there with the main multiplication function, it actually automatically clears out the multiplier between or once the operation is done, right? And what do we got here? 6525. And then the other thing is when we multiply, it'll clear the moving carriage, so the upper and lower dials, before doing the new multiplication. Right? So yeah, we see multiplier is now cleared, and our main carriage was cleared before doing the multiplication. So we have our expected result there, 172.9125. And we can do our last example here, which is 3.00. So 300 in the multiplier, and 42.875 on the main keyboard. So 4275 and 3.00. And what is that? 128.625. 128.625. And so that's our basic multiplication function on the Friden STW10. So our next multiplication function will be the accumulative multiplication. And what this allows us to do is, instead of clearing the carriage between each multiplication function, it just adds the multiplications together. So we can see we'll be working through this bottom example, and again we have quantities in pounds times a rate per, in this case, per 100 pounds. But rather than just doing a single function, clearing it out, and getting our next total of the single multiplication, it's going to accumulate them and give us a grand total of all of them together. And so now we just got to make a few changes. So we're still working with 2 decimal places on the multiplier, but we're moving to 2 decimal places on the main keyboard. So we'll clear that out here and move that down. And that means up here, we're just going to have 4 decimal places on the upper dials. And we can look at our first entry. So 200 pounds at 4.50 a pound. So 200 times 4.50, and we multiply, and that gives us 9, right? And next entry here is 3.45 times 12.65, and instead of multiply, we're going to use the accumulative multiplication. And so 3.45 times 12.65 should give us a result of 43.6425. But we can see here it's actually kept track of the 9 and added that to the 9. So our expected result here, 52.6425, is up here, which is the 2 multiplication results added together. And our next one here, 25.65 times 3.32, and you can see it'll move the carriage to the 0 position or the 1 position, but it won't clear it the way it would clear with just using the multiplication function. So our next one here, 24.15 at 4.12. 28 and 7, 5, 6 and 5, 96. And so our expected results are 286.2201 on the upper dials and 62.81 in the lower dials. And we can see 286.2201 on the upper dials and 62.81 in the lower dials. So that is accumulative multiplication, which allows us to do, like a running grand total of multiplication operations. So our next operation is the negative automatic multiplication, which is essentially the accumulative multiplication in reverse. So instead of adding to the running total, we're going to start subtracting. And the example here they're giving us is showing a discount. So in this case, $375.85 less 25%. And then what is that discount? Or what is that discounted price? And what is the discounted value? So we're still using two decimal places like accumulative multiplication. So we don't need to change any of the settings on the machine. So we'll just start that. And the way they're having us put the value in is using a multiplication operation. And that's so we can actually use the lower dials here to keep track of our percentage. So we'll multiply. So our original value, 100% of our original value, 375.85. And now we do that again, 375.85. But in this case, we're going to multiply by 0.25 and subtract it. And so we can see here our expected result is 281.8875. So 75% of our original value is 281.8875. And now our final operation for this one, we're going to see what the actual discount was, the discounted value. So 25% of 375.85. And that'll be just a regular multiplication. So 375.85. And now when we multiply, it'll clear out whatever's in the register before giving us our 93.9625. 93.9625, right? And we can do that again with our next example. So 125. Put that into the upper dials. And it's going to be a 35% discount now. Subtract. So our expected result of 81.25 and so 35% of 125 is 43.75, right? And so that's the negative automatic multiplication operation on the Friden STW10. So our next function is repeating multipliers. And so we're going back to our 5 decimal places on the keyboard right here, which means this goes back up to here. And we're back to yards of material at, in this case, it's always the same rate rather than a changing rate. And so there's a function on here called repeat, which allows us to skip having to re-enter the multiplier each time. So if we enter our $1.25 multiplier in, set the repeat on, and then we can move on with our next or our first multiplicand, which is 65.75, and then multiply. So we can see here that it's retained the original entry in the multiplier section. So we don't have to re-enter $1.25 when we do our next entry, right? So, and we can see, do we get 82.1875? 82.1875 is correct. So we can try our next one here. 32125. And that's 40.15625. Yeah. And our multiplier has been retained again. So that's the repeat function. And just for the sake of completion, we'll just do our last entry, 235.875. And what is that? 294.84375. So 294.84375. Yeah, that's what it is. Cool. So for this next lesson, we're going to work through the speedometer mileage tickets rate 0.084 per mile example. And this would be something for like a rental car company or like maybe a truck driver that gets paid per mile traveled. And it tells you at this rate, with the miles for the day traveled, what the charge is for what the total charge is for those miles. Yeah, and interestingly, speedometer mileage and speedometer reading, I would refer to these as odometer readings. So, I don't know, maybe in 1950 they hadn't invented the word odometer yet or something. But yeah, so yeah, we're given the beginning day odometer reading and the end day, and then we're going to derive the total mileage for that day and then the total charge based on that mileage at a rate of, I think, 8.4 cents per mile. So we're going to start with setting up the multiplier. You'll see this is pretty interesting. So we move this one over to position 3 and this one over to position 7. And we start by doing a 1 with 4 trailing zeros, and then we enter our per mile rate of 0.84. So you can see our last 3 digits are the actual rate we're working with, 0.84. And then at position 7, our 8th digit is a 1, and we'll see what that does. We can clear out the main keyboard decimal because we're not using it. We'll set this one to match our multiplier. And then this can come up here. And then we set our repeat entry so that we don't have to re-enter our multiplier each time. It'll automatically recall that into our multiplier register. And then we start by multiplying by our end day mileage of 5,555. So you can see that by having that 1 over at the 8th digit, what we've done is we've used that 1 to actually enter our miles or our odometer reading into the register. I'm going to move this over so this is a little more centered. And at our rate of 8.4 cents per mile, we have a total now of 466.62. But what we want is just the miles for the day. So now by using the negative multiplication function, we're going to multiply by the beginning day or the opening day miles, and then subtracting that from the end day total, then we'll be left with the difference. So our opening day is 5,437. And you can see the difference between 5,555 and 5,437 is 118 miles. And the charge of 118 miles at a rate of 8.4 cents is $9. 0.912, so $9.91 in a little bit. Yeah, we can do that once more since we've set up the machine so elaborately. So our next entry is 6308. And then our opening day odometer reading on that is 6,285. So it's a total of 23 miles and $1.93 and a little bit. So yeah, you can see right there, 23 and 1.932. So yeah, you can see by setting up this machine in kind of an interesting way, it allows you to keep track of the two values simultaneously. So you don't have to do the miles per day calculation separately from the total calculation. You can do it kind of all simultaneously just by setting up the machine in a bit of a tricky way to get those order of operations to work for you. But yeah, then we can just move on to our final example with the multiplication section. So for this final lesson in the multiplication section of the book, we're going to be doing something similar as the previous lesson, which is setting up the machine to keep track of two separate values at the same time. So we're going to be dividing it into multiple parts. But this time we're going to be working with the lockouts on the moving carriage for the upper and lower dials. So I'm just going to quickly explain those. So if we do a quick nonsense entry here, you can see when I hit the carriage clear, everything clears out, and it's done by these two things here. So if we do that again, you can see when I pull this one manually, it clears the lower dials. Now when I pull this one here, you can see the lower dials is linked. So not only does it automatically clear the upper dials, but it automatically clears the lower dials with it. I can lock that out by rotating it here. So now when I pull the upper dials or the upper clearing lever, it doesn't automatically clear the lower dials. And the same goes for when I do the automatic carriage clear here, right? So that one remains. And over here we have another one. And this carriage, the dials are split here, and that's what this white marker denotes. So between 9 and 10 is the clearing lockout for these two sides. So if we do something like this, so now in the 11 or the 10 and 11 I have 5, 9. I can lock that, so when I hit this, only the upper dials up to 9 will clear out, right? Manually or automatically. And then it's only when I set that back to its normal position that everything is allowed to clear out. So we'll be taking advantage of these in our next and final lesson here. And up here in this top example, what we'll be doing is we're given piece counts at a given rate. And what we'll do is we'll set up the machine to keep running grand total of all the entries And at the end, we'll have a total dollar value for all the entries, along with the total piece count of all the entries, as well as we go, it'll be giving us the individual line total for the entry. So again, we can do those two separate calculations simultaneously if we set up the machine correctly. So we're using 2 digits over here, and this will actually be our piece count this time, because our rates only have a single whole number digit. It allows us just to get that separation we need, so that we can move past this white marker and take advantage of the accumulating clearing lockouts. So up here, because we have 2 decimal places, 2 decimal places, it'll be here at 4, and then 2 decimal places and 9 decimal places, it'll be here at 11. And so this gives us two numbers past the split. So that'll be our cents, and then dollars here, and then dollars and cents over down here. And we'll start with our first entry. So we're going to do 42 pieces at $1.55. Oop. There we go. And so that's our first line total of $65.10. And for all entries, so far just one, we have our running grand total here of $65.10. Now we'll walk out these two from getting automatically cleared when we run future multiplication functions. And our next entry is 35 pieces at $2.05 a piece. Right? So now our line total for 35 pieces at $2.05 is $71.75. And our running grand total, $136.85 for the 77 units we've sold. Forgot that decimal marker. And now our final entry, 243 pieces at 35 cents a piece. Right? And so now we've sold 320 pieces total. Our grand total of sales is $221.90. And for the 243 pieces at 35 cents, that line total is $85.05. So yeah, that's our final lesson on various kinds of multiplication. And there's a couple of controls we didn't use, the non-enter or the non-entry, and then the counter control switch. Those we'll get into a bit later with, I think, some division lessons. But if not, we can do an explainer of that on those at some point. But yeah, that's multiplication on the Friden STW10. Thank you for watching.